The MonsterVerse's next big bad. That is what we are trying to figure out today, and I don't think it's the big popular one everyone is expecting, largely because the one everyone is thinking is a misattribution of the actual name. The monster who ate a star is what the Iwi people call. So let's figure out who this next Kaiju nemesis to the King of the Monsters and Kong is going to be. I'm Maxis. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to subscribe for more. Comment your thoughts on who you think is going to be the next big bad monster of the MonsterVerse is, and let's carry on. We're going to be starting off with least likely, going into the most likely, and then ending off with the ones I think are possibilities, but for various reasons maybe likely to unlikely. The biggest one is Space Godzilla. This is the one that a lot of people are really hyped up and really hoping to see, largely because of that line, the monster who ate a star, which is what the Iwi people said in Godzilla Kong the New Empire. There's a few reasons Space Godzilla is not really going to be available for being brought into the MonsterVerse. Namely, that line itself is said in reference to Godzilla. The Iwi people call Godzilla that, as well as a bunch of other names, largely because in a lot of cultures there are names of certain things that are kind of forbidden to be spoken, in kind of the same way that Voldemort is called He Who Shall Not Be Named, because the name itself incites fear, because, I mean, Godzilla is pretty heckin' scary. So the Iwi people call him that because, well, it is a fairly accurate descriptor of what Godzilla is. The atomic breath does kind of look like a sunbeam. The other part of this is the name of Space Godzilla itself. I mean, the name itself means it comes from outer space. Even if it is a mutant created of Godzilla's own DNA, it's still an alien. And the only way for that to happen is if Godzilla's cells gets into space somehow, which there hasn't really been a way for that to happen unless they say, oh, back in the 60s they had a sample of Godzilla's skin that they shot into space for reasons, which would just be kind of dumb. Which, again, would require some retconning as to how that even happened, which retcons are the MonsterVerse's biggest weakness right now. Sure that they could create some new monster that literally is just Space Godzilla, just a Godzilla with crystals, but it's not called Space Godzilla, at which point, why even do that? Because it wouldn't be Space Godzilla, it would be Space Godzilla in everything but name. What would it be, like Crystal Godzilla, which I mean was another name for the thing, but I don't think that is going to happen. I'd love to see Space Godzilla. He is one of my favorites. In fact, the first Godzilla figure I ever got was a Godzilla Showa figure and a Space Godzilla figure at the same time. So he is very special to me personally. However, I don't think he's likely for that reason. Up next is Ghidorah. I love Ghidorah. I would love to see him come back, especially another Ghidorah, and I think it is plausible King Ghidorah could return, perhaps a creature of the same kind, or if they go the route of actually going further with introducing aliens, that Ghidorah is one of several that these aliens have at their disposal, and they're sending another one to Earth because the previous one got defeated and this one is bigger and stronger, or something like that. We also don't know what happened to the skin that was on the Kevin head that was severed and used to create Mecha Godzilla, but I don't think that's going to have just spontaneously regenerated into a full King Ghidorah. Again, maybe it happens, but I just realistically don't see it. But now we get on to the most likely ones. You could call them the D-list kaiju throughout the Heisei era. Chief among them, and the one that I think would be probably the best answer going forward, is Batra. Namely, Batra and Mothra are counterparts to one another. Now, a lot of Godzilla's roles are actually what Batra kind of has. The two of them are in a way counterparts of one another, Batra being more aggressive, Mothra being the more compassionate and protective. However, Batra does have some own attributes of his own, namely being a direct, dark mirror of Mothra. We're going to be doing a full-out video specifically on Batra himself, explaining him in greater detail, so stick around for that. I'm really looking forward to it. He is one of my favorite kaiju from the Heisei era, and he could be somewhat of a more aggressive protector than Mothra, but not quite to the carelessness of Godzilla. Godzilla is not relatively careless, but he fights other monsters, though he will stop other kaiju from fighting in cities, of course, to save humanity. Batra could go the route of not really being this way, but rather seeing Godzilla getting more and more powerful. After all, he has absorbed the nuclear energy that was released by Dr. Serizawa to heal him after the Oxygen Destroyer was used on him, defeated his ancient rival King Ghidorah, and then now has obtained the new pink form after absorbing Tiamat's DNA, and, of course, empowering himself that way. He is becoming significantly more powerful, and possibly that could be the next big stage. Godzilla is becoming so powerful, some of the other primordial titans, a video on them as well coming in the future, see him as a threat because he is not a primordial himself. Mothra and Shimo are both primordials. Likely, Batra himself is also a primordial if he is introduced, and Godzilla would directly pose a threat to them because he is now equaling and somewhat surpassing their power. And yeah, he is close to strong on Earth, but that's definitely something that could give other primordials pause and maybe want to stop him before he gets too powerful. Of course, he does have the best interest of Earth at heart, so really, Godzilla is the good guy in the end. Biollante is another option that I think could be going forward. Instead of the original incarnation, and this is actually something we somewhat touched on with Space Godzilla previously, I think it is very likely we will be getting many of the classic monsters but with new backstories. Biollante, in this case, rather than being created from Godzilla's cells merged with that of a plant and a human, so making it a tribrid, Biollante, I think, would rather be a precursor in some ways to many of the modern Titans, herself being a primordial, possibly with less offensive capabilities and just more defensive and regeneration capabilities, as well as her massive, enormous size as she normally had. Sure, she may not have the best offensive capabilities, but Godzilla has struggled in the past with enemies capable of out-healing his atomic ray, and as we saw from the Muto, capable of shrugging off the atomic ray, means Godzilla needs to get creative with his combat styles, which is my favorite part of a lot of the movies, seeing Godzilla actually be clever and fight things. And Biollante would be a great way of doing that. She is bigger, stronger, possibly, but not faster, and can out-heal him. This kind of goes hand in hand with Orga. Now, Orga was also originally an alien, the Millennium UFO, which absorbed Godzilla's DNA, and Regenerator G1 overwhelmed their assimilation, turning it into the mutant abomination Orga. They can do the same story basically with that, with it being an alien that tried assimilating DNA, or just make it a natural thing on Earth that assimilated Godzilla's DNA, and Regenerator G1 overwhelmed it. Or it could be humanity was messing around with Godzilla's DNA and ultimately accidentally created the abomination. As the theme of the MonsterVerse is generally humanity messing around with things we don't understand, unleashing absolute destruction, and Godzilla needing to fix things for us, it would be quite an interesting way of doing things. The other reason why I think primordials will be coming back is they've only explored like 4% of the inner Earth, as they've said themselves. These are perfect opportunities to introduce a lot of these classic monsters deeper in the inner Earth. Speaking of digging deeper is Megalon. I think he's a possibility because even though his quite close association to aliens, namely in the form of his ally Gigan in the classic movies, Megalon is actually a native Earth kaiju. He is used by the Cetopians, who live inside of the Earth, and were disturbed by humanity using nuclear bomb testings, and he was basically sent to attack humanity. Somewhat of a similar story could be used for this, where Megalon is just a naturally existing beetle drill hand creature that is disturbed by humanity, and goes on the aggression path in retribution for his home being destroyed. Again, bringing back classic monsters as well as we did see in one of the Gemstone Godzilla things, Megalon was featured there. Despite being a relatively lesser known kaiju, he has still retained a lot of prominence. The same can't be said for the next two, which I think they're a bit less likely, but I think still plausible, King Caesar and Mechanicon. King Caesar, obviously he's, self-explanatory. He is one of the protector deities back in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, and an ally of Godzilla, actually one of Godzilla's first allies. Perhaps he could be another one of the monsters that the Iwi worship and are familiar with. Again, we don't know much about the Inner Earth. There could potentially be other tribes of people living in the Inner Earth, potentially other sects of the Iwi people, those which have maybe King Caesar as their protector. Though how would King Caesar and Godzilla end up fighting doesn't really seem too plausible unless the two encroach on one another's territory, but hey, who knows? I think it is a possibility, albeit a bit less likely one. And then there's Mechanicon, which I did mention. They already use Mechagodzilla, and I don't see them making another Mechagodzilla. I do really like it. However, it was mentioned at the end of Godzilla King of the Monsters, Skull Island was building mechanized defenses. Perhaps this could be the precursor of Mechanicon, as We thought that that was Mechagodzilla, which, as it turned out, it wasn't. And Mechanicong, I think, would actually be a bit of a fun little inversion, because Godzilla was originally supposed to have fought Mechanicong in one of the previous Toho movies. It would be fun to bring it full circle. Though, again, humanity creating a robot, I don't think it would go berserk in this case. I think maybe it would be a rogue human doing it in Monarch, but, again, Godzilla is stronger than he was back then, so maybe it wouldn't really come into working that way. Last up, they actually got 3 more after this, but the last 2 that I think are plausible, and these would be sort of single movie enemies or maybe even single movie allies, is Rodan and Varan. Rodan's already sort of had his turnaround arc where he went from bad guy to good guy, well, bad guy henchman in the form of helping Ghidorah, to being once again subservient to Godzilla. Except with Rodan, he's more of a wild card. He goes whichever way the wind blows, and whoever he thinks is the strongest, he will fight for. So, for now, he is on Godzilla's side. However, something stronger could come around, potentially again, something like Batra or Biollante, another primordial, and he will go over to their side and possibly try to fight Godzilla. As we know, Rodan is not the brightest bulb, he goes out of self-preservation. Perhaps he could come back to fight Godzilla, but again, Godzilla would easily stomp him, and I think Rodan knows this. But it would be fun seeing a bit of a redemption arc of Rodan. Honestly, I think Rodan should really get his own movie, or possibly even mini-series with maybe a Monarch spin-off. I don't know. I'd like to see more of this Rodan, because I think this probably is my favorite version of Rodan. And then there is Varan, again, another bit of a lesser-known kaiju throughout the Kaiju Toho library. Possibly another one, but again, he's relatively weak in terms of his abilities. He doesn't really have the big flashy abilities. I think he's plausible as sort of a smaller monster, maybe a helper, which again eventually comes over to Godzilla's side. And I mean, really what I'm imagining for the MonsterVerse is basically just like the kaiju version of the Justice League, where, you know, Godzilla's like Superman, Mothra's Wonder Woman, Kong is Batman, and just all of that, and now I kind of want to see that photoshopped in my head, and it's kind of funny. But I think that over time, there will be more of these monsters that are gradually just coming over to Godzilla's side, and we are going to be needing a big, big boss enemy, which is where we get to the last of these. And that's Bagan. No, not Bagon from Pokemon, Bagan. This is a kaiju that has been long overdue to make an appearance. He was drafted out of several Godzilla movies, even a few Mothra movies, and was first featured in Godzilla's SNES game, Super Godzilla, as the final boss. He's gone through a lot of different designs, however, his new design as of Godzilla, Super Godzilla, has been the one that has stuck. He has been shafted from movies, was going to have been fighting Mothra in one, and has still remained an incredibly popular kaiju for decades. He also fulfills that primordial slot of being a powerhouse. In fact, his original lore was that he was originally a god that could shapeshift, to eventually later become that he is a primordial kaiju that existed on Earth, and then in Super Godzilla was enhanced with Godzilla cells and King Ghidorah cells to become even stronger. I think if they are going the route for primordials, Bagan is the singular best option for them to go with. Now, I don't like the primordials as an idea to be future enemies. I think the idea of kaiju outpowering Godzilla and just being stronger than Godzilla, they're bigger, they're faster, they're stronger, and they're in every way better, kind of goes against the whole point of Godzilla being the strongest on Earth. We've already had this with Shima, where she is bigger and stronger than Godzilla. The reason why Godzilla is the king of the monsters on Earth is he's got the disposition for fighting. Shimo doesn't. Bagan would need to be out and out hostile, which would mean Godzilla would not be king of the monsters anymore. So, again, this is the big issue of the primordials. A lot of the best ideas for future foes come from them, but they also actively contribute to the retconning problem. So that's why I think the enhancement idea kind of would make sense. Maybe they find some fossilized kaiju and, you know, humanity does humanity. I also think that would be a better idea than just introducing aliens, as I think they might be eventually introducing aliens, which we're going to be getting into in the plausible section. But most kaiju for going forward, I think, are going to be homegrown Earth kaiju. Again, Ghidorah was kind of an exception, and really that comes down to Ghidorah is Godzilla's arch nemesis. you kind of have to have Ghidorah in there. And changes to his backstory, making him a natural Earth kaiju, people would not have liked that, and also just wouldn't have made sense with the movie, which, I mean, King of the Monsters already doesn't make a lot of sense. It would make even less sense that way. But yeah, long and short, I think Bagon is coming. But I don't think he's going to be the next MonsterVerse movie boss. I think maybe 10 years out, maybe 7 or 8 years, depending, then we're going to see Bagon. I think he is more likely than the one in the plausible category, which is Destroya. I love Destroya. I think he's pretty cool. However, in the MonsterVerse, I don't think he would work, namely because the Oxygen Destroyer does not have the same oomph the original did. So, I think Bagon would just overtake Destroya's role as this big, ultra, super bad, and even their designs are somewhat similar. Not completely similar, but visually speaking, I think people would be able to just mentally replace one with the other. Now, again, their powers are entirely different, but I think Bagon is more likely than Destroya. But I do see Destroya possibly coming in. Again, I think it's unlikely, and I think to do it, you'd need some alien involvement, but it's a possibility. Seconding that up with Gigan. Gigan, I think, is a bit more likely than Destroya, largely because, again, he is also an alien, but the issue with that is it would require confirming intelligent alien races exist out there because Gigan's a cyborg. Now, the best way of doing this, I think, would be it is sent to either monitor Godzilla or monitor and survey Earth after King Ghidorah was destroyed. Maybe investigate what the frick happened if they go the route of Ghidorah was basically an alien attack dog. This could lead out to them acquiring a sample of the Oxygen Destroyer and going back to space where they eventually create Destroya from that. Now, do you think it's likely? Not really. But I think Gigan is a plausible option, as he was in some sketches for concept art in King of the Monsters. So they are very clearly thinking about Gigan. Another one I think of is Megagyrus. Now, Megagyrus, I think she would be, again, a bit of a smaller enemy, possibly an early movie enemy that just gets taken out quick, fast, and in a hurry, because she's really just a fast bug. Really more so a counterpart, and in some ways to Mothra in a way, and I think more likely she'd be a fitting enemy of Mothra over anything. However, I think it is plausible, as she is a giant prehistoric dragonfly monster, and the further we go into the inner Earth, the more stuff we will see that is pretty weird and janky. Going hand in hand with Titanosaurus. Now, I love Titanosaurus. I got an irrational fondness for this thing. It looks big, it looks silly, it looks dumb, and that's kind of the best thing about it. Again, the more you go into the inner Earth, the more I think we're going to be seeing some of these things, and maybe as cameos, but it's a bit of a lesser-known kaiju. It hasn't really even appeared in any other Godzilla material. The closest was Godzilla Aquilus, and that was even just, partially inspired by. So I think that Titanosaurus would be a perfect candidate for another, possibly, not quite filler enemy, but enemy in an upcoming MonsterVerse movie, especially one where if they go back to just Godzilla fighting. I hope for future MonsterVerse movies, it's Godzilla and Kong in separate movies, because as cool as the tag teams are, I really like seeing Godzilla go solo. And he would be, I think, a good contender against Godzilla. Titanosaurus is absurdly strong. And I think like an actual kaiju wrestling match between the two of them would be pretty cool to see. However, that is really all I got here. Thank you for watching. Leave your thoughts below in the comments. Which monster do you want to see? Which one do you think is most likely to be in an upcoming MonsterVerse movie? And never forget Doug. Hopefully we get more to Doug. But I'll see you guys next time. I've been Max Allo. Long live the Kaiju King.